Hey everyone, Fisker Automotive is one of the newer EV companies that just started ramping up deliveries and production. But as people have started receiving some of Fisker's cars, investment enthusiasm has increased and I've gotten a lot of questions about Fisker stock. So in this video, I'm going to highlight where I think Fisker stock could be by the end of 2024. So essentially, where could the stock be 1 year from now? Now, to answer this question, I'm going to look at several assumptions and estimates, and I'll show you where I'm getting all of those items from. And then we'll bring it all together to make our stock price prediction for Fisker in 2024. So let's jump right in.
I want to thank the Motley Fool for sponsoring this video. Visit fool.com/Parkev for the 10 best stocks to buy now.
Okay, so one of the first estimates that we're going to use are the analyst consensus estimate for where Fisker revenue could be in 2024 and in 2025. This is a gathering of estimates from several Wall Street analysts that follow Fisker stock, and it brings it all together to give you an average number between all of those analysts. And so for 2024, the analyst consensus is that Fisker would deliver $2.31 billion in revenue. That would be a big increase considering they just started production like 1 quarter ago. So they're ramping up relatively quickly here. And then for 2025, the estimate is that they will bring in revenue of $3.97 billion. So we're going to remember these two revenue estimates for 2024, 2025. We're going to use that in our projection for where we think the stock price will be. Also, we're going to use the share count. So in Fisker's latest quarterly update for the 3 months that ended September 30th, they announced that they had basic and diluted weighted average common shares outstanding of 343,101,845. We're going to use this figure as our share count for our estimates as well. We are also going to use Fisker's forward price to sales ratio. As of this recording, this ratio was 0.286. We're going to use this as an input to our valuation estimate. Okay, so now let's go to our valuation estimator. All right, so here I have modeled out where Fisker's stock price could be in 2024. So let's look at what I've done here. So remember this number, 343,101,000. This is the number of shares outstanding. And then I have the total revenue estimate for 2024, which is 2.3 billion. And we also need the estimate for 2025, which is 3.97 billion. The reason we need the 2025 estimate, because when we're valuing the stock based on a forward price to sales ratio, we're looking at the sales for the next 12 months. And so if we're looking for the price in 2024, we need the revenue estimate for 2025. You always need the 1 year ahead revenue estimate when you're trying to get the stock price in the year before, just FYI. So I took the total revenue estimate for 2024 and I divided it by the number of shares outstanding to get a sales per share number of $6.73 for 2024 and $11.57 for 2025. That's the figure I've brought here as my 2025 revenue estimate. So if Fisker's forward stock price to sales ratio stays the same at 0.28, that could mean that Fisker's stock price could reach $3.31 by the end of 2024. Now I know that's a significant jump. Let me show you where Fisker's stock price is now. So as of this recording, Fisker's stock price is $1.75. So if that scenario was to play out, that would mean that Fisker's stock price could almost double from where it is today. But what if Fisker does even better than that? What if the prospects are so good that investors are willing to pay a forward price to sales of 0.75 instead of 0.286? Well, that would mean that the estimated stock price could be $8.68 by the end of 2024. If investors are willing to pay a forward price to sales of 1, that estimated stock price could be $11.57. So that's nearly 10x from where it is today in 1 year. That would be remarkable. I know Fisker stock investors would be thrilled with that result, considering how much they've lost with Fisker stock. If you bought it several years ago, it's down nearly 90% off its high. But what if things turn sour for Fisker, and instead of investors willing to pay a higher price to sales, they want to pay a lower price to sales? So instead of 0.286, we have that by 0.143. That would mean Fisker's stock price could be $1.65 by the end of 2024. Now, that wouldn't be a disaster, right? The stock price is $1.75 as of this recording. So even in a bad case, the stock price would only fall by 10 cents. Fisker stock investors have seen worse, and this wouldn't be a disaster for them. The other cases would be really good news. So the real question mark in Fisker's valuation is going to be its progress on revenue. Its progress on revenue. That's the biggest determinant. We see here at 11.57, these are the estimates for where the stock price could be. But what if Fisker's revenue doesn't come in as expected? What if instead of a forward expectation of 11.57 for 2025, what if that drops to, let's say, $4.25? Look how the valuations change as I change that revenue estimate. Now, you're not looking at all of those rosy scenarios. In fact, in the most likely scenario, you would see a stock price drop to $1.22. So the biggest question mark is the revenue, especially with a company like Fisker that's just starting out. They've already lowered expectations so many times for 2023. It wouldn't be surprising to see them lower expectations again for 2024. That's the risk. That's the risk. However, if they are to execute, if they are to deliver on these estimates, then the stock price could move meaningfully higher. The difficulty, the challenge is in execution for Fisker. The other notable risk in this scenario is that I'm holding the diluted shares outstanding as constant. I'm not including any shareholder dilution, which it's likely to happen. Let me share with you. This is where Fisker's average diluted shares outstanding have moved over the last 2.5, 3 years. From January 2021, they had 275 million shares outstanding. They now have 343 million shares outstanding. So that number is increasing. And if you increase that number, that's going to decrease the sales per share because you're splitting it among more shares. That's another risk to pay attention to. If Fisker needs to spend more money to increase sales and it runs out of its cash on hand and it needs to raise more money by selling more stock, that's going to increase shares and that's going to dilute shareholders. So those are two of the most notable risks for this valuation estimate, is the revenue and the shareholder dilution. Those are two things where I think could change meaningfully. The other thing here, when we're looking at the forward price to sales ratio, you might ask, well, what would make it go from 2.86 to 0.75? This is all up to investor psychology, investor enthusiasm. If investors like what's happening with Fisker, they would be willing to pay a higher price to sales for Fisker. If they don't like what's happening, then their willingness to pay a higher price to sales would diminish. So if Fisker makes this progress to hit this revenue target or hit this revenue target for 2024, I think it's more likely that the price to sales ratio would increase. I don't know if it would go up all the way to 0.75. Maybe it goes up to 0.5 instead of 0.75. But if they execute, then investors' enthusiasm and their willingness to buy will increase because they will see some history with the company making progress and hitting and executing, right? So far in 2023, Fisker has not executed very well, right? We've seen some hiccups with production ramp. We've seen some hiccups with logistics and delivery. And these are things that make investors cautious. And where that shows up is in the forward price to sales. They decrease their willingness. Okay, so that's what will change this forward price to sales ratio, is if Fisker executes, as they make progress, investors become more comfortable and their willingness to pay increases. And then the opposite is also true. So it ebbs and flows based on Fisker's execution for the most part. And then the second factor is macroeconomic factors like interest rates. When interest rates decrease, for the most part, investors' willingness to pay forward price to sales increases. They're inversely related with interest rates for the most part. Not always, but for the most part. So I just wanted to give you in general the factors that could increase or decrease this forward price to sales ratio. Okay, so all that being said, what is my estimate of where Fisker stock could be in 2024? There's a lot of risk here. There's a lot of speculation here, a lot of estimates and assumptions that we're using here. But if I had to make my best estimate, I would say somewhere between $1.50 and $1.85 for where Fisker stock price could be by the end of 2024. Now, if it executes and it does well, I think the stock price could be meaningfully higher. It could reach the $3-4 range. But if it struggles, then the stock price could be meaningfully lower. It could go into the 50 cents, 25 cent range. So this is a stock that has a wide range of outcomes, really wide range of outcomes, and it makes it very risky. So this is only for the most risk-seeking investors that are willing to take a higher risk for the potential of a higher reward. Did you know that over 90% of the people that watch my channel are not subscribed? It'll really help support my channel if you hit that subscribe button. And oh, by the way, one of the benefits of being subscribed is that I take requests from subscribers more often than I do from non-subscribers. So if you prefer that benefit, please subscribe to the channel.